It's Primus Tracks with Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, Primates, Primus fans, new, old, young, whatever you are. You found Primus Tracks at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Twitter. I am Josh. Over there is Frankie.
Hey, Josh.
And we have a special, very special guest today. His name is Luis Ortega. He is here because he is a musician who actually knows things about music and was kind enough to talk to us today as we explore the album Frizzle Fry further with the track Frizzle Fry. Luis, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me here. It's really good to be here. Love your show.
Thanks, man. Luis, you actually have a pretty close connection to Primus as far as music goes. You want to tell us about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Started playing guitar in high school, and then back in the days of Toys R Us, I ventured over after one shift and picked up an old VHS copy of Videoplasty and popped it in when I got home, and I had my mind blown away. Seeing the incredible musicianship of Primus, I said, I think I'm going to switch over to bass, and I haven't really looked back since then. And then at that point in time, I was fortunate enough to capture a show during the Tour de Fromage back in '03, and I caught them at the Wiltern, and it was an incredible show. I think a lot of fans would agree that particular tour was pretty special. Getting to hear the music live and just witnessing firsthand how powerful those three guys are on stage, who just left an impression on me that has never left. So started studying their music, tried to understand how they approach things, and long story short, I ended up putting together a Primus cover group of my own called Rapscallion. And so after learning some of the songs and going through the material, I started to see kind of how they put things together. And so with that, I hope there would be some opportunity to talk on that.
I want to come back around to a couple of things there. You got Videoplasty at Toys R Us?
I should have clarified. No, right next door was Tower Records.
There's no way. Okay, that makes much more sense. Okay, that all tracks now. I was like, man, you have the coolest
right next to the play
store.
school section, Videoplasty.
Well, if you really want to warp some kids, that's a perfect place to put it. So, and then your band Rapscallion, you guys are based in Los Angeles, correct?
Yes, and as far as I know, currently we're the only group that is covering Primus material in LA.
Nice. Yeah. So, guys, if we ever get live music again, and you're in the LA area, look for Rapscallion. The other thing I want to point out is, Luis, is you're pretty active on some of these Facebook groups like Primus Fans Sucks and so on. But what I really appreciate, you're putting your studies out there, and you really have no fear because you're putting that out there, like say videos of you playing different riffs, like something from Hamburger Train, I think is one I saw recently. You're slowing it down. You're doing like 80% of the tempo, and then you're making mistakes, and who cares? Because you're showing us how it's done, essentially. So we're really getting a good look at how these riffs are constructed and kind of the ideas behind it. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you very much for pointing that out. In fact, after a while, I was going to refrain from doing that because I didn't want to give the wrong impression of myself. I wasn't sure how people were taking it. Then I started getting responses in private messenger and whatnot, asking, hey, I really appreciate those videos, getting to see how, something like that gets worked out, and then seeing it get from point A to point B is inspiring. So I thought, okay, well, if people are getting something positive out of it, maybe it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, I am. I mean, I know a little. I don't know a lot anymore as far as music goes. So it's really helpful for a guy like me. So hopefully others too. So folks, seek them out. We are here to talk about track 5 of Frizzle Fry, called Frizzle Fry. And speaking of the number 5, before we jump into it, I have a couple of 5-star reviews from Apple Podcast about our podcast. So Frankie, sit up straight because you need to hear this. Our first 5-star review is it says 5 out of 5, and it's from Mr. Magikarp 64. Mr. Magikarp 64 says, by far the best podcast of all time. Also, thanks for getting me back into Primus. I missed them. That's
so cool.
Yeah. Now there's an expectation. Our second 5-star review that came in recently was from Dan's Macabre, or Danzy Macabre. I'm not sure which. 5 stars. Welcome to this world, Dan Z says. A fantastic deep dive into the weird world of Primus and the Colonel. Much obliged for this well overdue and wonderfully executed podcast. Well, thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much, guys. Those reviews are so cool.
It makes us happy. It keeps us going. And here's the thing. If you submit a 5-star review and reread it on the air, you have entered the Punch Bowl. Frankie hands you a life jacket. You get to dive right in. And Luis, by the way, you're an honorary Punch Bowl member now, so you'll get your life jacket at the end.
Yes!
All right. and then you can dive right in when we're going off the air. Back to our other 5, which is track 5 of Frizzle Fry, appropriately titled Frizzle Fry. Let's talk track history. First thing I have is that Frizzle Fry has over 300 live performances dating back to 1988, which stands to reason because it does appear on the Sausages demo. It's a top 15 tune as far as Primus studio tracks that made it to live performances. One other thing I'll say right now is when I first heard this track or first saw the cover of this album, I thought Frizzle Fry was some weird cooking technique that maybe like fancy French chefs did. But now I know it's about being completely obliterated on acid.
Yeah, and if I may add, I think it might have a little something to do with the anti-drug campaign at that time. Your brain is on drugs. This is, the eggs on the frying pan.
It absolutely evokes that imagery, especially with the cover of the album. Very much so. Frankie, what else do we have?
Okay, well, it's pretty hard to track down the first performance of this song because, as you know, the early Primus concerts are not well documented at all. We can't say for certain when it was played for the first time, but as you mentioned, it harks back to 1988. And it also appeared on the Sausage demo. Then it appeared on Suck on This and then on Frizzle Fry. So it's one of the most recurring Primus songs in the catalog.
Yeah, in just 3 years, we had 3 different versions. A demo, a live, and a studio. That's pretty great.
Of course. We have to point out, though, that they don't change radically from one version to the other. It's one of those tracks that has been pretty much the same since its conception.
Yeah, there are a couple key differences on the Sausage demo that are very interesting. One of them is Les gives a really primal scream in about halfway through the song, as opposed to that huh! that he does. There's more of a scream, and that makes me laugh. But and the other thing is Todd's guitar part in the second half of the tune, especially when it picks up the pace, is vastly different. And I don't know if he was just kind of noodling there or doing a riff there so that he could make space for a solo later because they were recording a demo, or if a solo was planned there. But we know that Larry ended up putting down a pretty good one.
Yeah, he sure did.
Well, there are a couple of interesting things mentioned on the track. There's a moment where Les says, when Barrington starts to breathe again.
Yeah.
So he's referencing Barrington Hall. Sorry, it was a Berkeley student housing cooperative.
Yes.
And Primus actually played a number of concerts there during their early years. It was a pretty mythical place because they had some really eccentric parties. I think Les mentioned at some point that there used to be LSD, a spiked punch, and I think he borrowed from that for the title of Tales from the Punch Bowl.
He absolutely did, yeah.
So this place served as a housing cooperative from 1935 to 1943, and then from 1950 until 1989. But the complaints piled against the place. For example, the residents complained that it was not a place suited for habitability. There used to be boa constrictors, fires, dried blood on the doors, food and burning matches thrown everywhere. People wandering through halls, brandishing a whip and striking the walls with it. And there was also like this wall completely covered in graffiti. So in the last years, the cooperative was the focus of numerous accusations regarding drugs and noise. And I believe Frizzle Fry pretty much Frizzle Fry is pretty much the soundtrack to that place during those times.
I think a lot of that energy from Barrington Hall was reflected in kind of the more aggressive nature of the album for Frizzle Fry, in my opinion, because with Barrington Hall, I think they turned like a huge dining hall that they had into like an unlicensed concert venue, and they had bands like X and Dead Kennedys and other bands just ripping it up. And then what was really interesting about Barrington Hall is how it did also like the culture. Like if there was ever a picture to represent a word, and that would be counterculture, I think Barrington Hall should be that picture for that word. I mean, in the early 60s or whatnot, of course, they started out as political activists and social activists and whatnot, and then they were anti-apartheid, against segregation. And the most interesting thing to me personally was that they were against this thing called the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Basically, they wanted to surveillance people in their private lives to see if you're a communist in any sort of way. And then Nixon was a part of that. So you had like these college activist kids in the 60s that already don't like Nixon, that don't like this, and they're going to rebel even further, making like this counterculture to that. And I think they went over against that committee. And so you get that, and then like all these like social oddities within that little subculture against the norm, and then you throw like the prime of punk rock on top of that. Then you turn that punk rock hippie values thing into like a concert hall, and like he had said earlier, like the punch bowls spiked with, I think, LSD and whatnot. And I didn't know Primus was actually performing there. I thought that's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, Barrington Hall is a heck of a history.
I didn't know about the HUAC thing because that's fascinating. The McCarthy era is something else. So I'm going to look up that HUAC stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. And you guys are pointing to all the stuff. Like, I should just retire from this podcast. You guys are doing great.
Oh no! I'm sorry. It's just such interesting stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like you're hitting all the points that we definitely need to hit as far as Barrington Hall goes, and as we know, so Tales from the Punch Bowl is, as Frankie mentioned, that's where that title comes from, and of course the solo track from Les Claypool, Barrington Hall, same idea. So there's a lot of stuff coming from this one place where they performed pretty early on. You really you hit the part about the shows in the dining hall, because the ironic part is they called them wine dinners.
Oh, yeah?
That's what they called those gigs. So they would have these punk bands in and they'd say, we're having a wine dinner. And then this band would come in and they'd go insane, right? So
that's pretty awesome.
That's pretty rad. So the public, out to the public, it was a wine dinner, but everybody else knew better. There's a couple of other connections to this track too, and this idea of Frizzle Fry. And they're linked in the Primus oral history over the Electric Grapevine. And Matt Weiniger relays a tale in which, during the recording of this album, Les insisted that everyone drop acid and totally trip balls while they were recording. And fortunately, I don't think anybody took him up on that. But as it goes, they did smoke a heroic amount of marijuana, I guess. But so probably better for recording. But I think my favorite part about that entire anecdote is that Ron Rigler, he was one of the engineers working with them and working the board. I think he turned to Matt Weiniger at one point and said, "Please don't make me do acid." So the band's the band leader's insisting on it, and the poor engineer's going, "Oh no."
Just trying to do a job.
And I think I might have a connection to the line, "I do believe in Captain Crunch." Okay, and it might have to do with Barrington Hall. No idea if this is true or not, but I'm going to go with it. So I found a history. So I found a history of Barrington Hall, an article. I think it was from a student newspaper at Berkeley, but there are a couple articles out there. But there is. Where to go? There it is. Okay, so there were some comments at the end of the article, and it was about the demise of Barrington Hall, and one person posted, and they said, quote, "I was in the UC housing co-op in the late 80s, and I did the food delivery as my work shift. That was the only time I entered Barrington. I recall making a delivery one day which included multiple cases of sugary cereals. One case had a desirable plastic prize. Several Barringtonians, which is what you call the residents of Barrington, I guess, promptly opened the cereal boxes, dumped the contents on the dining tables, and walked off with the prize." And then he editorialized and said, "At least open the bottom of the box so the cereal is not wasted." And then somebody else replies, "Why do you think the cereal was wasted? We ate it straight off the table." So, no idea if this is the Captain Crunch thing, but I read that and I thought, oh, what if it is?
I want to feel. I feel like it is.
I want it to be true. Frankie, you're the voice of reason, though. Luis and I are off the deep end already.
I wanted to ask you about the Andy's painting green again line. What do you think that means?
Right. Yeah. So my question in my notes is, who is Andy? That's all I got. I don't know. And I don't know the green part, but all the stuff leading up to it is definitely somebody totally tripping out on a statue and losing their mind, I think. But I don't know if we ever got a question I don't know if we ever got an answer to the question of who is Andy.
Who is it? That's going to be a question for one of those VIP meet and greets, I think.
Yeah, I'm surprised that hasn't come up at some point or been passed on to the masses as far as, I asked who Andy was, and who knows?
What about the less ism in the lyrics, between the play on words between Hollywood and hologram, the hologram? That's
a fun one because he definitely sings it hologram. But it's in the lyrics, it says hologram, singular, but I think we reasoned out that he's saying the plural. So who the hell knows what's going on? Maybe he was on acid for the recording of this.
Wouldn't be a surprise.
Oh man. So that's a good question. Like because he does say hologram, and we need to listen to some live performances because I don't remember. I was actually looking through my show stats, and I've seen Frizzle 6 times. Honest to God, can't remember how he sings it live. But I will say, because I want to hear yours, Frankie, and yours, Luis, as well. I remember the Oddity Fair tour in 2010, Central Point, Oregon, or I went to that show. They performed Frizzle Fry, and there was a guy in front of me. I was pretty close up. And that part where he yells, "This time they might take him away," I yelled it as loud as I could. And I kind of scared that guy in front of me because he turned around, like I had hit him on the head or something. His eyes were really wide, and he just kind of went, hell yeah, dude. So,
people freak out at concerts like you're not supposed to repeat lyrics or something.
Whatever. I don't know if he was just because I hadn't sung the lyrics up to that point, but that's one of my favorite parts is when you get to yell, "This time they might take him away," and I certainly startled him. But this is a track when it comes on, and like I said, I've seen it 6 times. So when they play it live, I really don't bounce around too much, especially in the second part of the song, because I really want to watch these guys shred it out and rock it out as a power trio, because this is one of their faster, heavier moments. So I'm really into it. I really want to see it. How about you guys?
That was definitely one of the highlights of the song, I think, for almost anybody. I mean, that was pretty much my first showcase of, understanding clearly, like, these guys can really play. The tempo, the song tempo is at 162 BPM. Then you jump to the next section. They have a little break, and then the drums pick up the pace, and then it jumps immediately to like 175 BPM. And the fact that they can play at that tempo and articulate those notes and just keep it going and going to, I think, pretty much till the very end. It was just, hey, we're Primus, and we can play. Yeah. And that was kind of a statement to me.
And that's that edge you're talking about, because that second half of this track is their most metal they'll ever be. And which is fine. They don't have to be any more metal because, like, it's great.
Oh, yeah. And then, you have Lur, who's, like, fresh out of his metal background.
Yeah.
And then I think I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had his band Kaka, which he had, like, a Frank Zappa cover group. And how awesome is that? I don't know how old Lur was in the late 80s. I think he was still a teenager, and he's shredding on Frank Zappa, and then he's coming out of, like, I think Blind Illusion was credited as, like, the first black metal band or death metal band. I'm not sure which genre.
Possessed, yeah. His time at Possessed. They're pretty much seen as the forefathers of death metal.
How awesome is that?
Yeah,
Lur's accomplishments are just kind of ridiculous. And
yeah.
You got him coming from that background and Frank Zappa, and you throw him in there with Les, and then Frizzle Fry happened. Although, like you had said, Todd Huth was primarily a huge foundation to the album.
Oh, yeah. This is one of the tracks he is credited on for guitar melodies. And at this point, we've had, To Defy the Laws of Tradition, Groundhog's Day, and now Frizzle Fry. He's credited for the guitar melodies on those. And there's a couple more coming down the pike.
Oh, yeah.
Frankie, have you gotten this one live?
Yeah, I've caught Frizzle Fry several times. And I think my favorite version so far has been the silver anniversary extravaganza at the Fox Theatre in Oakland back in 2016. It was my first Primus New Year's Eve. It was a really sick Frizzle Fry. Regardless of what is your favorite Primus track or your favorite album, I think that when they bust out Frizzle Fry live, unanimously, everyone is waiting for the fast part to go crazy.
Yeah. What I really like about this as a live track is you get the noodling, that light finger picking, I guess, at the front end of it. And then when he hits the notes, and I can't do it justice, but when he hits those first notes, the crowd knows what's coming, and it's wonderful. That the air just fills with that anticipation. I know it, for me, it does for sure.
And just like Too Many Puppies, I think when they play it live, it's one of those cases where, the visuals in the background are perfectly synchronized with the music. The choice they made of the vintage anti-drug documentaries are really, really fantastic for the song.
Oh, and Luis, you pointed to that earlier, so there's definitely that string going through there, that theme. Frankie, are there any exemplary live versions that we should know about?
I think if you pick anything from the Fromage or Hallucinogenetics tour, it's going to be a pretty wild performance. Because
they were busting, of course, every night on Hallucinogenetics tour, but the Fromage tour, I think they dusted that one off quite a few times.
I'm pretty drawn to this particular show that I've mentioned before, the Seahawks Exhibition Hall, Seattle, Washington. It's really a really heavy show. Any track from Frizzle Fry on this particular concert was absolutely mind-blowing.
I'm sorry, which concert is this?
Seahawks Exhibition Hall at Seattle, Washington.
Oh, what year was that? I can't remember. 2004.
It was already the hallucinogenetics portion of the tour, and it took place on June 2nd, 2004.
Write that one down, Luis.
Oh, I'm writing it down.
We jumped around a little bit, but we're at the point where we get to talk about the musical themes and elements. And Luis, this is why you're here, man. We could certainly use your help. I mean, this song has atmosphere. The bass drives the tune, the fast part, and I'm like wringing my hands together because it's so wonderful. I don't know where to start, but if you can, and kids, have a seat, get out your notebooks and your pencil. And, however, when you a graphic organizer is fine. 2-column notes, that's good too. Whatever works for you, or just write down feverishly everything Luis says. I mean, where do you start, man? Where do you start with this track?
Well, shoot, that's a really good question. I mean, you can start with technique, start talking about the music key, but I guess I'll just start with playing the riff itself.
Yeah.
Well, the song, you can play on a 4-string bass guitar, and it doesn't even have to be 24 frets or anything like that, although that certainly helps, because as we know, Claypool has a full range neck on all his basses.
Right.
So you can definitely play this on a Fender Squier or Jazz. And in standard tuning, E, A, D, G, and the first few notes are. And that's basically a G sharp to G. And what interesting element I got to dip into about Primus's sound is the usage or addition of what is called tritones. So this song, I would consider it to be in the key of G major. And in G major, you don't have this G sharp note.
Right.
You would, yes.
Wait, so he's starting a half step above the root note when he in this tune. I never noticed that.
Yeah, he does. And if you notice that, like, if he didn't do that and say he played Frizzle Fry diatonically, meaning playing notes that are only within the key, then it would be this. But he's doing the tritone, so he flattens the A to a G sharp, and then so that's the difference. Better example to illustrate this tritone that Primus utilizes in their sound is that right there, that interval. You can consider that a diminished fifth. We'll just call this the root for now for context. Okay. So G sharp to D, that's a tritone. And if you make a power chord, which they do in the song eventually, you also get a D sharp in here as well, which causes another tritone because in the key of G major, you have an A natural. So if you have D sharp, you're tritone away from A natural. So you have D sharp to A natural, and then you have G sharp to D natural.
Wow.
And G sharp, of course, being not part of the key of G major, and D sharp not being part of the key of G major either. I had to really illustrate this because in Primus's music, they add a lot of tritones. And this song is a really great example of that because the tritone is a main theme. To get back to the riff,
are those power chords at the end there?
Yeah, so you have root, fifth, and octave. So you have the C chord, and then you have a D chord. So C, or a C5, and a D5. And those are diatonic to the key of G major.
Yeah.
And,
So,
as you know,
how difficult is it to play a power chord on a bass guitar? It just looks impossible. Because I play a little guitar.
off the bat, I'd like to say it's actually simple. The reason why it can be challenging to a lot of players, especially new bass players, is that what a lot of musicians don't take into consideration is how you set up your instrument. When you get a brand new bass, say you just bought a bass straight from the store like a Guitar Center or a Sam Ash, typically the action's not set to be played on yet. It's like that bass guitar probably came straight from Japan or China or Mexico and has been under a lot of different temperatures, so that the pressure and the tension that it's under has been altered. So the strings are probably lifted higher or they're closer to the neck. So when you get a new instrument, you should get it adjusted and make sure that the action or the way the strings are set above the neck or the fretboard are sitting properly and even. And so if you have that in place, playing power chords should be relatively easy.
Okay. And then I think I'm hearing some slapping in there, or what is that? Is there some slapping going on in there too, or is there just banging away on the thumb like your Thunder Thumbs Johnson?
Yeah, there is some thumping. I know Claypool doesn't like to call it slap bass. He likes calling it thumping and plucking.
Yeah.
After this section, so I'll try and isolate this one section where he starts thumping away. So he does that.
Oh,
And all that is just flat thumbing. That's an important aspect of Les Claypool's sound, is that he doesn't bury the tip of his thumb into the string and pluck outward. Everything that he's doing with his thumb is always flat thumbing down. So there's no double plucking. Everything is down strike with the side of the thumb. No plucking upward and outward with the thumb.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And then some of that, it sounds like, he's kind of helping, because he's talked about how he has to be the bass player and the rhythm guitarist essentially at the same time. So that sounds like some of those kind of muted notes that help us, or that help fill that space and continue a phrase even. Is that what's happening there?
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely a huge aspect of Claypool's approach. He would also say that he's a very percussive player.
Yeah.
And he finds a lot of, like, to me, very fascinating approaches to how to mute bass lines and make them have their own sound quality. You can hear that in Lacquerhead. You can hear that in the Time of the Cats bass solo run, that fast six tuplet run that he does. The muting technique is a huge aspect of Claypool's sound, and he's very particular about that. Like in My Name is Mud, forearm on top of the low string to get the right chunky muted sound when he's playing during the verses, because he's not really playing any notes during the verses on bass. He's just doing all percussion.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's hard to replicate on a 4-string.
What about the coda of the track, Luis, the fast part? What is Les doing there?
What's happening there during the fast part is that, as I said earlier, they jumped the tempo up to about 175 BPM. And Claypool starts off by playing on the C and D note, and he's doing this this groove. I can only touch on it. In fairness, I cannot say that this is consistent with what he's playing, but in a very slow way. He's essentially doing a vamp, this really cool, like if you could slow the song down, it has like a very solid groove to it. But in short, he's vamping off of the C and D notes, and he's using his three-finger, I would say 16th triplet finger technique to his advantage. And the fact that the amount of time that Claypool must have worked, the amount of time he put into doing this section has without a doubt taken years. I mean, he would have had to have been doing this for hours, at least 4 or 5 days a week, for a couple years to build up the speed and the articulation to play at that tempo.
So Frizzle Fry is definitely not a track that can be tackled by a beginner on bass.
You could do it, but you would basically have to sit down and understand where the notes lie rhythmically, be able to interpret it as accurately as possible, and work from the ground up with the metronome. Start like the old saying goes, to play fast you have to start slow. And when I was working on Tommy the Cat, I had to sit down and start at like a slow tempo, 60 BPM, and do like repetitions. I would practice the same riff 10 or 20 times in a row, take a break 10 or 20 times in a row, and then start increasing the speed of the tempo until eventually I reached the album tempo speed. So a beginner can do it if they have that amount of passion and drive, for sure, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart.
That's pretty fascinating because I think we all love the fast part of Frizzle Fry, but as it's been mentioned before, Larry tends to steal the show with his guitar solo, which is absolutely amazing. But hearing you talk about what Les is doing pretty much confirms that it's incredibly complex, and I pretty much imagined that it took him a long time to come up with that part. It's really cool to hear you confirm that because you're a bass player. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that during some live performances, particularly during Fromage or Hallucinogenetics, there were some moments where Les tended to overpower the guitar with the bass part in the fast section. I don't know if it's because he was playing even faster or he was modifying the melody and he was sort of improvising. What do you think happens with that part during live performances?
During live performances, from my perspective, I believe Claypool is doing a lot of improvisation. I've been trying to interpret what scales that they are going with. I believe that they might be doing something around a C Lydian or D Mixolydian mode approach in this section. I also believe Lur's doing the same thing, or even a D augmented scale, which gives it kind of like, in my opinion, I don't know, like a Middle Eastern flavor kind of sound quality to it. But again, during live performances, I believe that Les Claypool might sound a bit outside because he is altering the melody and he's exploring. And I'm sure Lur probably kind of lays a little bit lower harmony-wise and provides more of a backup, I think, at that point, from what I've seen. So I think you're right on that.
It's pretty incredible. It makes you realize that, Primus songs are not approached in a conventional way. You would imagine that maybe they got together in the studio and they just jammed the song and it came out the way we listened to it, but there seems to be a ton of work behind it.
Oh yeah, I mean, just the sheer speed that Claypool plays at, and I mean all of them. I mean, I think it's fair to say that all three of them are just phenomenal on their respective instruments. But yeah, the amount of time it takes and how consistent you have to be to play that articulate at those speeds is a testament to their dedication and to their craft.
Yeah.
I believe there's been interviews with Lur where he said, he didn't want to think about promoting the band or anything because that meant that was time taken away from practicing. And I remember hearing or listening, or not listening, but reading Claypool talking about when they were jamming and making songs during the Sailing the Seas of Cheese days that they wouldn't even know what music key they were in. They were just going for it. So, yeah, they're definitely explorers, and on top of that, the intensity of their dedication to their craft is just incredible.
I have a suggestion for you, and I don't know if it'll take, but if you want to play that at album speed on the first try, I think you do need to eat a bunch of acid.
I think Claypool would agree.
Okay. Now, don't do it live right now, but if you could report back after and let us know if it worked out, I think our listeners would appreciate that, because it might give them a new avenue for being able to emulate. Now you're bringing up a lot of really cool stuff here, because it's just fascinating to hear this, given that I'm an amateur musician at best, like not even a novice. But the idea that you can talk about it like this and help us understand just what's going on just reveals more about this track that, as we listen to it, we just go, man, that rocks. And it does. But getting inside this and you having the know-how really it helps me give a better appreciation for this track.
Absolutely. For Josh and I, it used to be the fast part of the track, but now I think we have a newfound appreciation for the song. The next time that I hear Frizzle Fry, I'm definitely going to appreciate a lot more the effort behind the composition of the track. And I also wanted to ask you, Luis, if you think Claypool approaches the song differently on the pachyderm bass as opposed to the Carl Thompson.
Well, the first thing off the bat I'd say is the bass tone. The bass tone to me, with Carl Thompson, from what I've heard, I was fortunate to hear him play on Carl Thompson's before he switched over to pachyderm. The Carls had more of a wetness to them. Like they were chunky, but it had kind of this. It wasn't overly bright, just bright enough, and it gave it this interesting mid-range type of tone that wasn't very nasally, if you will, as a bass tone. I would say that probably encouraged him to try different voicings melodically when he would experiment during the faster portion of the song, of course. And then when I've heard him play on pachyderm basses, I hear him exploring more as a lead player. I think because it has more of a brighter, punchier sound, I think it kind of pushes him towards hearing higher registers and exploring more higher melodies, in my perspective.
See, this is the stuff I'm too busy yelling. This time they might take him away, so I'm not listening during this. So this is fascinating. So it's interesting to hear that the equipment can, given the tonality that you can get out of it, can really drive what you do. Like I said, I'm such a novice at this that essentially every guitar is the same. But to be able to know those nuances and to explore those, that's a seasoned musician's thing. That's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, those nuances really go a long way. I think, not to sidetrail too much, but I think even Justin Chancellor, bassist of Tool, he says when I get a fresh set of strings, his inspiration is at a peak, because even though he's playing the same bass guitar and playing the same notes, he hears the notes differently on a bright set of new strings, and it inspires him to go into different directions harmonically. But then again, who really thinks that deeply about just a set of new strings? But yeah. There you go.
Well, if you take 8 years between albums, you're probably thinking of everything.
Zing. I wanted to point out something interesting about the Frizzle Fry days, if that's all right.
Please do.
Yeah, I was kind of looking into it, and apparently there's some connection between Green Day and Primus during the Frizzle Fry days.
Yes, and I think, Frankie, you had that info. Green Day had opened for Primus a couple of times here and there.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that.
Isn't that strange? And I don't know if they had much of a connection between the bands, but they were kind of probably running in similar circles.
Yeah, the reason why I think they had that connection is because of Mark Core, who was Primus's music video director. And I think Mark Core did Buck Naked and the Barrel Bottom Boys. He did that music video for Teenage Pussy from Outer Space. And then I guess through that connection, he went over to Primus and then did Tommy the Cat and Mr. Crinkle. And so I think Green Day tapped on them because they liked, the artistic direction that he went with Primus. And so he ended up doing a music video for Green Day he did Longview, and that was the song that started their career basically.
There's a connection right there. I didn't know the Mark Core connection. That's cool.
What about the sculpture? I want to bring that up because it's something pretty iconic in the Primus canon. And
oh yeah,
perhaps you recall that during live performances, before the vintage footage comes on, there's an animation of the head on the frying pan with oil coming out of it. Do you recall that?
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, there's no music video for Frizzle Fry, so if I'm not mistaken, the first time that animation was actually used was for the Lacquerhead video. So it kind of makes you wonder if they had planned something for Frizzle Fry and it remained unreleased, or if they actually went out and dug out the sculpture just to make that animation for the Lacquerhead video, which seems kind of unlikely. What do you guys think?
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. So maybe they were sitting on some footage that they'd played around with, and could have been promo footage. It could have been a video for this track. I'm curious about that, actually. Yeah, because if you do the sculpture and you do the shoot for your cover art, you might as well get some footage too. So maybe that was just laying around for years and they didn't know what to do with it.
I don't know if you were aware of this, but all of those iconic sculptures, the Frizzle Fry guy, the Suck on This Baby, the Seas of Cheese characters, all of that stuff is at Rancho Relaxo. Les kept everything. I have a pretty good friend. His name is Sean. And he asked Les at a VIP what were the whereabouts of those sculptures. And Les told him that he had them all in his closet.
That's funny. I was thinking like, oh, sure, the Primus Museum. That would be wonderful, and Frankie, you could be the curator of all the exhibits for sure, But
well, Frankie's perfect, yeah.
Yeah, it would have to be the size of a closet, but it would be it would be really great to have Frankie as the curator, and then Luis, man, you could do some demonstrations, or how like at the historical parks, they have the people in period costume. So Luis, we could get you with a replica Carl Thompson and the haircut and the sunglasses and whatever, and you can be, hey guys, here's the deal. I can't do a Les Claypool, but you could just do the voice. Just be the period piece. You could be 1991 Les Claypool. You could be 2008. You could be whatever you want.
Welcome everybody, and pretend like you're half animatronic.
Sure. Oh, sure. Like the presidents at Disneyland. This is a $1 billion idea right here.
I agree. This needs to happen.
Yeah.
Call his management.
Yes. Right to management. Right into the round file. My favorite. I don't have any, from a perspective of Frizzle Fry, I don't have any further questions of you, Luis. It was really cool of you to share with us what was going on in that tune and even play some bass for us. I appreciate it, really. I really do.
Yeah, Luis, it was absolutely fantastic to hear you play the track, to break it down and explain for us what's it all about. I'm quite intrigued by the complexity of the fast part, so I'm definitely going to check that out and have a newfound appreciation for the song. Thank you very much, Luis.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And I have a feeling that we'll be talking to you again, so don't run away.
Oh, absolutely not. I'll be over here.
Great. All right over there, right where I'm pointing. Frizzle Fry, just say no, because you've been tracked. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Frankie. Next time you hear from us, we'll be talking I guess we're going to go fishing.
Sounds excellent.
Awesome. All right. 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts always make us smile, and keep talking to us on Instagram. We're having a great time. You can find Luis online and various Primus fan groups. If you're ever in the LA area, if we ever get live music again, check out Rapscallion, his Primus tribute band. That's all I've got. Later days.
Willie Mays.